Hello, lovelies. Alright, housekeeping. They've screwed up my meds again, but fortunately, I have learned from the prior experience that I have had, and I have kept a stash of them. So, I should be okay this time around. Don't know what went wrong. I guess we'll find out. In terms of my health, been back to the doctors again. Nobody really seems to know why I'm experiencing the pain that I am and have been for a very long time now. But we're going to keep adjusting the meds. My blood pressure is still concerningly high, but not as high as it has been in the past, so I'm going to have to go through another med change. I know some of you care, which is why I keep you up to date, and it also helps explain why I might be of a certain attitude and presentation, or might be absent a day or two. So, just so you know. Also, I'm back to having a bit of a cough as a side effect. So, that's helpful when you're recording audio and video, isn't it? If you're in the UK, be careful out there today, because the far right has decided to declare the Great British National Strike, stealing ideas from the left. Yet again, it's not a strike, it's a protest. They're attempting to hijack issues like the winter fuel payment, which is being reversed, and more personally, the changes to the disability payment rules that the government wants to put through. It's not unlike when the far right shares memes on social media about Poppy Day or VE Day or some other event or thing going on, and they get loads of people to reshare their material, and then they switch gears and put out the racist stuff. But if you're out today, especially in the cities, please do be careful. Join a counter-protest if you can. Right, on the Red Tories video, Makiura says, is it possible it's time for a new left party in the UK? Most of the people on the left who are concerned, worried, / abandoning Labour because of what they've been up to since they got into power, though they have done a lot of good things, it's just they're not as attention grabbing. Most of those people are migrating to the Green Party, but my concern is that the Green Party is extremely middle class, and its concerns are extremely middle class, and they have no path into power, unlike some other third parties. So it's difficult to see where people have to go, especially given our voting system. With its first past the post nature, you're going to have to look at wherever you are and basically vote against people you don't want rather than for someone you do want. That's how it tends to work here. There is space perhaps for a proper old school left-wing party, but probably not. There just isn't the class awareness, the class consciousness and so on that you'd need. And the ground is pretty much taken up. There's a wide variety of people within Labour, and there's a wide variety of people within the Greens already, and kind of ecological and left-wing philosophy tends to go together quite well. But I don't know. It's the same problem as it ever has been. The right tends to congregate around one group. The left tends to fracture into thousands of little infighting groups, each more pure on one particular topic than the other. On the Daggerheart review, Eltiket says, another generic PC fantasy game for modern audiences, just like D&D 2024. Hard pass. Yes, to an extent. It's a bit more story gamey. I guess it represents the final form of the assimilation of early indie games into the mainstream. So, I mean, you could recover it, I think, and do some things to make it more palatable to more regular gamers, the non-theatre kid gamers. But is it worth the effort? That's the thing. So they're on about a campaign in a sort of Dark Soulsy type world. How you accomplish that with these rules is something that piques my curiosity. And while I'm here, public service announcement. Pique in this instance is spelled Pique. Pique my interest, not peak as in the top of a mountain. I run into that a lot. Samu and a lot of other people who I take to be Critical Role fans say, why does this video have such a negative tone? Because the game gave me a negative feeling and incorporated a whole bunch of stuff I regard as negative, despite being neither entirely an old school gamer nor nearly entirely a new school gamer. Plus, I'm British. We are reserved. We damn with faint praise. We don't tend to go over the top. You know, someone asks how we are, we say, not too bad. Could be worse. Worse things happen at sea. It'll all come out in the wash. It's just our nature, and mine in particular, as a chronic depressive. Also, you know, this is criticism when I review something. I did mention some things I thought it did well, but I'm also catering to my audience to a degree, bringing up things that concern them. Quite a lot of people came at that review with a similar attitude to Samu. Look, if you want a nice review, go elsewhere. If you want an echo chamber, isn't this great, isn't everyone lovely, go elsewhere. You know, life's not all blowjobs and burritos. Sometimes things are negative. People have different preferences to you. That doesn't mean they're evil or must be destroyed. This happens with a few games. I was kind of anticipating it, and I thought there'd be more of this kind of attitude from the critters. But it has happened with other games, and yeah, you have to wonder why. Or at least I do. Fantastic TTRPG says, when I was talking about the initiative system, or lack thereof, says, I concur, and would add that in my very British experience, players choosing turn order leads to a vicious cycle of politeness, where people are afraid to step on others' toes, or else stand out. I think the design team had issues with 5e's implementation, but didn't understand the importance of structure and managing the chaos of an action scene. And yeah, I'd agree, and with them as a group, perhaps it's not so much of an issue. Or perhaps with them as a directed and sculpted and pre-scripted game, they have less of an issue. But they also wanted an excuse for one character to dominate a scene. But for most people at home around their own table, that's not going to work. Storm Regalia says, you're very pessimistic. His game is a masterwork in TTRPG books. A pessimist can only ever have a nice surprise. As to masterwork, I would say only in the sense that the monster was Dr. Frankenstein's masterwork. Right? I've speculated before on this channel what a Franken game would look like, yeah, with all the best elements of various other games brought together. And I think we've usually come to the conclusion that, you know, these things taste great individually, but they don't necessarily taste great put together. Like tandoori ice cream or or something, I don't know. And that seems to be the case with a Critical Role's game. With Daggerheart, it's a Franken game. And does that work? I'm not sure. I ran through a couple of sort of test scenarios with test characters to see how the rules played in practice. It's hard to get a group together that quickly for a review, and with it just being me, it's fine, but with my decades of experience, I see potential problems, which I expect people will house rule out the way. But when you review something, you have to review it as is, not how you selectively interpret it to be or would modify it to be. Music says, I can see that it is the perfect system for them not to have to break the kayfabe of their campaign, make perfect scenes where one character takes many turns because it's an emotional fight and it has enough crunch behind it to mask it all. Perhaps, but mostly we tend to see those things in tension. Drama and narrative and crunch tend to be in tension with one another. If you have more of one, you generally have less of the other. I think they try to over-regulate the narrative and yet under-complete the rules. It's always a difficult balancing act in game design, but I don't think they've pulled it off. Maybe it's that lack of experience, but it's certainly a better effort than Candela Obscura. Salsa Doom says, another review delivered with the soothing tones of a late night DJ. I might have misheard you, but you mentioned Matt Mercer in connection with Tabletopless. Managed personal brands annoy me. Such a risque move would increase his esteem greatly in my books. Mercer is aware of Tabletopless. I don't think he's a regular viewer, but he is aware of us, and was very nice, particularly to Cherry. So, that's nice, to have such a big voice not running scared of adult workers in the industry, and sharing a bit of banter. So, I give him a bit of latitude that I might not give other people. But Critical Role is not for me. Daggerheart might be, but I would have to mangle and mutilate it a bit first. As to my soothing late night DJ tones, I'm no Whispering Bob Harris, and I'm no John Peel, more's the pity. It would be good to be the John Peel of RPGs, I think. Now, Teenage Kicks, which was his favourite song ever, and good on Fergal Sharkey for his work with river pollution in the more modern days. Anyway, before I get lost in a sea of nostalgia, moving swiftly on, Necrophage says, ignoring disabilities in mechanics feels like the ultimate gaslighting from those who are afraid of hurting your feelings. There's a way to both recognise the reality someone has to live in and also be respectful. I talk about this in my pamphlet, Diversity Dungeons. And as a disabled person, I really, really hate this approach that they have taken, and that a lot of modern games have taken, where sure, you can play disabled people, but it has absolutely zero bearing on the game itself, or it ends up being something that's helpful, as with the combat wheelchair, rather than something that is a disability. Patronising, annoying, and as you say, probably gaslighting. On the cognitive load video, Trollsmith says, so which games, besides your own of course, and Call of Cthulhu, best exemplify the rules supporting the genre, and how do they do it? Feng Shui, with its very, very simple system and its stunt mechanic, it encourages you to put the effort in to describe over-the-top kung fu action cinema or gun fu activity. It's not for everybody. Some people just aren't that creative and can't come up with all that stuff on the fly. For those of us who can, it's great. Gumshoe, with its structured investigative rule set and the way in which it allows you to continue without necessarily making all the rolls, or being more about marshalling your resources. That works well. Shotgun Diaries by John Wick, not that one, the game designer one, is interesting. It's a highly simplistic zombie RPG where it's all about managing risk. I find that very interesting. Dread, with its Jenga tower, works really well at building tension on two fronts, both in the game itself and in the mechanism for doing stuff in the game. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, 1st edition, 2nd edition and current edition, mostly 1st edition, I would say. It is grim, gritty, dirty. It's the Dark Souls of RPGs, you could say. There are aspects of a lot of games where the rules support the genre, but it's rare that the whole game pulls it off, with everything working together in the right way. Old Silhouette system, I think, does it very well. The switch between wargame and tabletop is seamless and perfect in a way that something like Lancer isn't. Vermine Supremacy says, when we were first playing Delta Green, I was taken aback by how well Delta Green has got the nuance of realistic deadly combat and modern operations, while not being overly tight in skill applications or hard time counting stuff. Our games master actually likes Chaosium games better than 5e. Well, it is the second most popular RPG. And when talking higher fidelity games in high fantasy genre, because earlier editions of Wolfrup are better at low fantasy simulation, I prefer Pathfinder 2nd edition to 5e or any third party publisher with good travelling and social mechanics, preventing players from doing whatever I find distasteful. Now that I've played it, because the amount of crunch actually reduces mental bookkeeping and DM tools are better and more accessible to refer to instead of a lot of questionable half-baked systems and optional rules you tend to overrule as Games Master because they drain fun from the game rather than add to it. There's a balance, right? So having a rule for everything and having the rule for everything be different depending on what that thing is becomes a looking up exercise unless someone is really good at memorization. But too loosey-goosey and an enormous amount of both social stress and cognitive load is placed upon the Games Master because so much is at their whim and they have to moderate and create so much. So there is some sweet spot, but that sweet spot is always moving depending on the public taste and experience with games at the time. On the OnlyFans Sweden ban, well, this was a character. Emperor Xenu says, pretty odd to hear a self-described socialist spout off these libertarian cliches. Getting fucked by strangers for money is just another type of work. Only someone who's never been fucked by a stranger for money could think this. There's a reason why absolutely nobody encourages their own kids to take up this filth, no matter how proud of it they claim to be. It doesn't affect you, except through mainstreaming cultural attitudes that lead to pornified mass culture with continuous perversion escalation, which inevitably affects everyone, including minors. And OnlyFans has empowered e-prostitutes. They've let a tiny fraction make bank, while the vast majority of creators sell their dignity and future prospects for pennies, because the Pareto distribution is extreme. This liberal claptrap, in a society where men in their 20s are suffering from erectile dysfunction due to goonerism, choking and slapping during sex are normalised due to their prevalence in hardcore, which is now just regular porn, and the ubiquity of online smut has led to a flood of paedophilic content with the tacit approval of peddlers like OnlyFans since they make money off it. Future generations will learn why that stigma came about in the first place and why sex should be treated like a sacred ritual, whether you're religious or not. Thanks for the advice on how to win your kids' approval by being degenerately permissive, buddy. I'm going to mostly just go with the replies that I gave, but I wanted to include this in today's comments video. I said, small L libertarianism is perfectly commensurate with socialism, especially when it comes to social issues. You kind of missed the point here in that OnlyFans and similar aren't prostitution. Nobody's getting fucked. And they're within the control of the creator. People may not encourage their kids to take up these careers, but plenty are supportive if they do. That's good parenting. The problem is the stigma, not the work. It doesn't affect anyone else. If anything, it's beneficial to society. As others have pointed out, greater access to adult entertainment correlates, and there's evidence of causation as well, with less sexual assault. In short, the problem is attitudes like yours. But you don't need to consume or make the product. You don't need to support your kids if they do move into doing this as a career. You'll be a shitty parent if you don't, but still, you don't have to. It neither twists your arm nor picks your pocket, so it's really none of your business or the government's. You're being extremely selective in cherry-picking these claims, which are not supported by the wider literature. Some people like choking and slapping, and it's good that they can get that if they like it. I suspect you're the kind of person who would have celebrated the arrest of Simon Timmerman. Why was there a stigma? Because we didn't have contraception, antibiotics, vaccinations, and we sought to control sexuality, particularly women's. Again, if you want to be the po-faced prude, that is entirely up to you and more power to you, but you don't get to exert your weird chastity fetish on people without their consent. Erectile dysfunction is complex, and no link is definitively established between the two. That hasn't stopped people on both ends of the horseshoe trying to claim that it is an issue to support their particular brand of censorship. But it is a popular claim amongst regressives that this is an issue. If there is any link, and again, it's not established, it'll be like anything else. Too much of a good thing is bad for you, whether it's delicious cake, too much water drinking during a rave, or wanking. Carlos Alfredo Simon Timmerman is the New Yorker who was stopped in Puerto Rico in 29, on his way back from a vacation in Venezuela. Simon Timmerman was stopped by US customs agents who found a pornographic video in his bag entitled Little Lupe the Innocent, Don't Be Fooled by Her Baby Face. The movie featured Lupe Fuentes, who is now a former porn actress and DJ and musician, I think, who, as the movie title suggests, was a 23-year-old with a much more youthful appearance than you would have thought. So, she was an adult. Is it her fault if she looks young? If she appears in a video, why do you consider that to be paedophilic content? Or if someone calls someone else daddy or mommy, you know, who cares? Why do you care? It does not affect you. Let me assure you, this was going on long before you were aware of it. Paul Berry says the amount of struggle cuddles went down when corn was legalised. God, the euphemisms the internet age comes up with. Not learning from history is humanity's saddest trait. They care more about signalling their outrage than actually bringing down the instances of bad behaviour and so on. They're not willing to engage their conscious brain and overcome their disgust reflex in order to do so. Edward says, hooray for sex worker adjacent men who advocate for their rights to earn a living. How much did the ass spanking with your novel cost, and what is it with you Brits and spanking anyway? Are you implying that there are men in sex work? In fact, men working in the sex industry have it far tougher than women. They have lower pay rates for film, and male companions are not only less compensated, but are assaulted more frequently. RE capitalists, where's my Larry Flint? Larry Flint was a goddamn hero, and nobody says different in this house. The spanking is the thing I've considered for promotion, but haven't actually done. So, yeah. Paul Berry says, also, does hardcover versus paperback affect her asking price? Is there a Kindle discount? Don't do spanking. with your Kindle unless it's already broken. That seems like a very expensive spanking implement to me. Alright, we'll see you around this weekend. Zang. Activate 2.0 is the sequel and second edition to Activate, inspired by the likes of Global Frequency, Person of Interest, Crypto, Piracy, and other issues. This is a game where you play activists and experts brought together to change the world in a positive and meaningful way by mysterious forces lurking in the darker side of the internet. You can download it or buy the print version at all the usual places: post-mort.com, drive-thru RPG, and lulu.com.